Well, hi friends, happy Monday. Welcome to the Monday of Holy Week, the last Monday before Jesus' death and resurrection that we celebrate at Easter. Now, there's a number of things that happen on that Monday before Jesus' death, but the main event that most people focus on is when Jesus clears the temple. In the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew actually puts the clearing of the temple right after Jesus' triumphal entry. And so Matthew almost makes it sound like it happened on Palm Sunday. Mark tells us that it actually happened the next day after the triumphal entry. In Luke, he only has 2 verses on the clearing of the temple, and so he doesn't really give us any timing of it. And in the Gospel of John, we actually have the clearing of the temple happen at the very beginning of Jesus' ministry in John chapter 2. Now, it's possible that Jesus cleared the temple more than once, and so maybe John is telling us of another time. And when it comes to Matthew, when he wrote his gospel, he would often compress his stories or put multiple stories and sandwich them together in order to not only make a theological point, but really have his gospel driving constantly forward to the cross of Christ. And so while we look at all of these different nuances, we're going to follow Mark's direction as to when the clearing of the temple happened. And we believe that it happened most likely on Monday of Holy Week. Now, because Luke says very little about the clearing of the temple, and because John has it very much as almost like a separate thing, not a part of Holy Week, we're going to simply focus on Matthew chapter 22 and Mark chapter 11 and their retellings of the clearing of the temple. If you do want to look it up in Luke, it is found in Luke chapter 19, verses 45 and 46. But again, there's only 2 verses on it. So let's look at what Mark says about the clearing of the temple. Mark chapter 11, starting at verse 15. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and he would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he cleared the temple, he taught them, saying, "Is it not written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations'? But you have made it a den of robbers." Now the chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. Now there's a lot going on here, right? Jesus comes into Jerusalem, he goes straight for the temple, and he begins to open the pens of the animals. He chases the animals out. He opens the cages of the birds, sets them free. He starts flipping over tables, scattering money and cages everywhere, driving people out. And even those who are trying to simply carry some of their merchandise through or out of the temple, he chases them out the quickest way possible. Now, the religious leaders were not happy with this, and they were not happy with this for a number of reasons. First, Jesus was becoming way more popular than they were, and so they didn't like the amount of influence that Jesus had with the people. But second, the religious leaders got a cut of what the merchandise or the merchants and the merchandise that was sold, they got a cut of the profits because they were the ones who chose which merchants were allowed to sell. And so in order to keep their favor with the religious leaders, the merchants would give some of their profits to the Pharisees and the religious leaders. And so the Pharisees were losing money, they were losing influence, they were not happy. But it still begs the question, why did Jesus drive out these merchants? After all, the people needed animals to sacrifice, and Jews who came from all over the known world to make sacrifices and donations needed to also exchange their currency so that they had the right type of money to be able to pay donations. So why was Jesus upset? And the reason why he was upset was simply because they were gouging the regular people. They were extorting the regular people and selling the animals for way too much money, and they were charging a huge amount of money in order to exchange currency. And so what the religious leaders and the merchants were doing was they were simply taking advantage of the people. And Jesus wouldn't have it. He was so upset. He knew that the temple was to be a place of prayer and worship and sacrifice, a place where people could come and connect with God. And yet the religious leaders were simply using it as a tool of power and of making money. And Jesus just wouldn't have it anymore. And so he clears the temple. And of course, the Pharisees are angry, but the people loved it. They're amazed at him. Not only amazed at his teachings, but amazed that he's willing to challenge the authority of the religious rulers and leaders, and that he was willing to stand up for them. And so they loved him for it. Now, if we jump over to Matthew 22, we see that after Jesus cleared the temple, starting in verse 14, that the blind and the lame came to him at the temple, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and the teachers of the law saw the wonderful things that he did, and they saw the children shouting in the temple courts, "Hosanna to the Son of David," well, they were indignant. "Do you hear what these children are saying?" they asked Jesus. "Yes," Jesus replied. "Have you never read, from the lips of children and infants, you, Lord, have called forth your praise?" And so once again, Jesus goes to prophecy and says, hey, here in the prophets, it says that this is what the Messiah would do, what he would be like, and I am the Messiah. And he heals people, and he continues to teach them, and those following Jesus are becoming greater in numbers than those following the religious leaders, and they are not happy about it. So what can we learn from this story of Jesus clearing the temple? Well, as we saw on Palm Sunday yesterday, Jesus comes to us gently and humbly. He wants to help us. He doesn't force his help on us, but he wants to help us, to heal us, to forgive us, and to make us whole so that we can come back into a relationship with him. But here we recognize, and Jesus really highlights that he and that God is holy. That God is the one who determines what is right and what is wrong. And that really flows out of his nature and his character, right? Who Jesus is and what Jesus is like, that is our standard for righteousness and holiness and what is good. Whereas anything that goes against what Jesus is like, well, that's wicked and evil and wrong. And so really what Jesus is saying is, I'm coming to you. I am here to help you, to save you, to heal you, and restore you. But you have to come to me on my terms. You have to come to me. We all have to come to God. We all have to come to Jesus on his terms, based on what he tells us is right and wrong, what is good and evil. And so we have to come to him in the way that he tells us that we need to come to him, with reverence and awe and respect, humbly, recognizing that he is God and we are not. And so let me encourage you on this Monday to come to Jesus with that respect, that fear, that awe, recognizing he is God, knowing also that when we do come to him, that he lovingly welcomes us and he gently comes to us and helps us. And yes, it can be painful to change and become who Jesus wants us to be, but he will do it as gently as he can for us. Well, at the end of both of Mark and Matthew, there are sections on the clearing of the temple. They tell us that Jesus left the city of Jerusalem when evening came, and he returned to the city of Bethany, establishing this pattern of Jesus staying at Mary and Martha and Lazarus' home in the city of Bethany, but that he every day would come into the city of Jerusalem to spend time with people, healing, performing miracles, and teaching the people. And then when evening came, he would return once again to Bethany. So let me encourage you, have a great Monday. Come to Jesus with reverence, respect, fear, and love, knowing that he is coming to you to save you. And join me again tomorrow as we look at what Jesus did on the Tuesday of Holy Week. Have a great Monday.